so what else do I want to cover in this video? Because it's supposed to be very quick and informal. I have a feeling this is going to be another long one because I'm babbling. Okay, yeah, recent Elton safaris. All right, the first one I want to talk about was one that I made a little over a month ago to a town in this part of the province called Woodstock, Ontario, and there's a store there called Record Works. And so I went about a month ago, and I ended up finding one thing that I didn't have, one Elton thing I didn't have, and one non-Elton thing I didn't have. And I'm going to show both of them to you. First one is another copy of Tumbleweed Connection. Yes, uni copy of Tumbleweed. It is, I mentioned Compo, the Compo Company of Canada in an earlier video. This is a Compo Company of Canada pressing of Tumbleweed Connection. It's yellow swirl uni. Okay, not the original inner. I haven't cleaned any of these or given them MoFi inners yet. So the sleeve is American printed and has a thumb hole. I haven't seen too many copies of Tumbleweed thumb hole. And the booklet's in there. Just very quickly, the Compo Company of Canada was, I think it formed not long after the First World War. I think it was 1918 or 1919. They were an independent record pressing facility here in Canada. Compo, I think, was the first independent facility. There were others. And they had a pressing facility in Lachine, Quebec. And then they became the Canadian licensee for American Decca Records. So they pressed all the Decca stuff up here in Canada. And then at some point, US Decca bought Compo. And they maintained them as an exclusive manufacturer of Decca up here. And then they built a very large and modern pressing facility in Cornwall, Ontario, on Old Montreal Road and Boundary Road at that intersection. The building's still there. It's not a record plant anymore, but it was Compo, and it opened in the early 60s. And then the Music Corporation of America, they subsumed Decca. Compo then became property of MCA. But the brand was allowed to survive and continue up here in Canada. But then MCA Canada finally formed as a Canadian domiciled conglomerate up here to serve the interests of the Music Corporation of America. And they built administrative offices in Willowdale, Ontario, which is a suburb of Toronto. They kept the Lachine, Quebec facility for minor administrative duties, and the pressing operations continued there for a little while, but basically by early 71, those were shut down. And the Compo facility in Cornwall, Ontario became MCA Records Canada, their exclusive pressing facility. So the reason why I'm telling you all that is because this was pressed probably at the Cornwall plant back in its final days of the Compo name. So Uni Records released Tumbleweed Connection in the States and Canada in January 1971. If in December of 70, the Compo name was retired, the fact that the Compo name actually is on this LP in the rim text, that's a very rare chronological kind of thing. This must have been pressed in December when they still had the labels there and they were in a period of transition. That might actually explain maybe why the sleeve was printed in the States. So there are a number of mysteries there. I'm trying to figure out, the sort of work out the chronology, but I didn't know that Compo pressed copies of Tumbleweed until I found this at Record Works. So, I'm kind of glad. It's also, sentimentally speaking, the only other Canadian Uni Records copy I have of Tumbleweed was the copy that my father bought back in the early 70s when he was a young man and assembling his record collection. He gave that actually to my mother when they were dating, that copy, because my mom really liked Elton John, but she didn't have Tumbleweed. So my dad gave that to her. And that was the copy that she handed me when I was 8 years later, when I was getting into this guy I called the Tiny Dancer guy. It's like, did the Tiny Dancer guy ever do anything more than Tiny Dancer? Did he have other albums? And Tumbleweed was one of the records that my mom handed to me. So that other copy is a very special copy. And so, which means that this is the very first Canadian Uni Records copy of Tumbleweed that I ever actually bought with my own money. Okay. The other thing that I got at Record Works on that trip is right here. And it's a non-Elton record. Forgive me. I won't go on and on too much about it, but it is an OG vinyl copy of Billy Joel's River of Dreams. OG, not the 2015 Friday Music reissue, which had the gatefold sleeve. I realize this one's not a gatefold, but I've heard mixed reviews about the sound quality of that one. This is the Holland pressed in Holland for the European market. It's Red Label Columbia. okay? And, you know, for an LP on which they've crammed a lot of music, this was a CD-length album crammed onto a single LP. It sounds really good. It sounds better than both the CD versions of this I have. I have the original issue from 93, and then I have the digitally remastered version that came out in 99. This sounds better than both of those. It sounds really good. And so this is not a UK copy. This is one of the Holland copies, but it's one of the OG copies from 93, and I finally have it. So, and you know what? I know a lot of people don't like River of Dreams, but I love it. I love it. I really do. I think it's easily one of my 3 favorite Billy albums. Okay, so that was my Elton/Billy Safari to Record Works in Woodstock. A couple weeks after that, I then went to 3 different places in London, Ontario. And the first of the 3 places I went was a place I've mentioned before, Grooves Records, which is on Dundas Street. And I've found a lot of stuff there over the years, but on that trip I didn't find anything too exciting. I did find some 45s. I forget why I bought them. Here's the video. I shot a little video in my car going through the 45s I got, and I'll probably be able to better explain in that video what 45s they were and why I felt the need to get them. Here's the video. There's Grooves. Let's have a look at the 45s. All right. This is Someone Saved My Life Tonight with House of Cards, Canadian pressing. I already have one of these, but this is in really good shape, and it was only $1. And, you know, sometimes I think, you know, it's worth it just to have the extra sleeve, right? This is Canadian Press Island Girl with Sugar on the Floor. This is actually, for 50 cents, I couldn't say no. This is in better condition than the one I already have. So I already have one of these, a Canadian Press Empty Garden, Take Me Down to the Ocean, but it's a picture sleeve, and this one's in a generic Music of Canada sleeve, and I have to say it kind of brings back memories of the very first copy of this I ever had, which I got at a flea market in Morrisburg. It was exactly like this, but I later sold it. So it's nice to have one, just a generic sleeve. And it's in great condition. See, this is why I got one of the other ones. I can just take the sleeve from one of those. This is an American MCA Gloversville pressing of Black Rainbow MCA Daniel. So that's what I got. Big spender, eh? Okay, so I got those at Grooves. After Grooves, I went down to the Wortley Village part of London, and there for the longest time was a great old store called Village Idiot Records. And I knew that the owner was trying to sell it, but I hadn't heard the news that the owner had actually sold it, or it would appear anyway, because there was a sign on the door saying, Village Idiot Records is closed. Thank you to all my loyal customers. There will be a new record store opening in this spot in March of 2024. So I haven't been back, but I just want to say very quickly, Village Idiot Records. I got some great stuff there, but on that day, nothing, because they closed. I then proceeded to Speed City Records, which is a really cool store, I gotta say. And while there, I got some Elton goodies, nothing terribly rare, no grails, but some interesting things. 3 things. Okay, 4 things, sorry. 4 things, 1, a non-Elton record, and I promise I'll keep that short. But quickly, first one, a Canadian MCA pressing of Don't Shoot Me, all right? And again, I haven't cleaned these, haven't properly sleeved them. This one did not have, I hate that sound. Did not have an inner sleeve. This is a Canadian Black Rainbow pressing. So it's not, you know, the earliest copy out there. Just like in the States, the earliest copies of Don't Shoot Me were pressed with that solid black MCA label with the white text. This is a Black Rainbow. So this is probably maybe 73, 74, might even be 75. I got it because I don't have a Black Rainbow copy, American or Canadian, of MCA, so of Don't Shoot Me, so now I do. Wasn't too much money either. I got yet another copy of Friends. This one is an American pressing, not a Canadian. The Canadian pressings, you know right away if it's a Canadian copy if the back panel is all white. Okay. This is very early, and the sleeve construction is different from all my other American copies, where you get a sort of, the back panel is a slick that's been pasted down. None of my other American copies have that. Now, of all the different manufacturers that press copies of this, which one is this? It's another mystery pressing. Seriously, I've kind of, so why did I get it? Well, it wasn't too much money. It was in good shape. I think the minute I saw the runouts, I figured it's probably the same deal as the last one I showed you. It's most likely a Shelley Products pressing. The lack of some markings in the presence of others would suggest that's what it is, which is not a bad pressing to have. But of all the pressings of friends that I do have from anywhere in the world, I would say probably the best sounding two are the original UK Paramount and the limited pink vinyl anniversary edition that came out a couple years ago, 3 years ago? Yeah, almost 3 years ago now. Anyways, another copy, friends. Oh, this last one's going to open up a can, as they say. I'll try and keep it brief because there's no way that in this video I'm going to be able to deal with this specific issue. You'll know what I mean by specific issue in just a minute. So I got yet another copy, vinyl copy of Tumbleweed Connection. This is MCA 3001, so that's a later catalog number. It is a Canadian MCA Blue Rainbow. I can tell from the pressing ring, okay, and the typeface, this was pressed by a company in Toronto called Precision Records and Tapes, not to be confused with the current Canadian vinyl record manufacturer called Precision Records, which is affiliated in a way with GZ. This is a different company, Precision Records and Tapes, and I don't know when they began, and I'm not even sure where in Toronto specifically their plant was located, but they pressed Canadian Elton John records from 1979 up until about 1982, maybe early 83. It's hard to know exactly when they stopped operations, but because we know that the MCA implemented the Blue Rainbow design early to mid 80. So this was pressed sometime between 1980 and at the very, very latest, early 83. And this is not the first Canadian Blue Rainbow MCA copy that I've had. I had one that was actually an even later copy pressed by Sinram. I had that when I was a teenager, and then I kind of sold it when I got rid of my original record collection. I kept most of my Elton Johns, but some of the duplicates, because back then I was crazy. I thought that it was kind of weird to have more than one copy when you didn't really need more than one copy, right? I was so crazy back then. I've since seen the light. Anyway, I had one of the Sinram pressings, and here's the point I want to make. That one, which would have been pressed in the mid to late 80s, and this one, which would have been pressed in the very early 1980s, have the original mix of Where To Now, St. Peter. The original mix. As opposed to what, Matt? Well, if you go buy just about any CD copy of Tumbleweed from the mid-1980s all the way up to present, including all the vinyl reissues that we've had. Now, there have been a great many of those, but there have been a few. None of them have the original mix of Where To Now, St. Peter. The original mix had different guitar parts from Caleb on the second verse and towards the end. The guitar licks were different, and also, most conspicuously, Elton's vocal was double-tracked on the choruses. And those were all on the original UK copies. A lot of the DJM copies in foreign territories had that mix. Original US and Canadian copies had that mix. But then in the UK, and I think it was the B3 lacquer number, the mix switched to a different mix where Elton's vocal is not double-tracked in the choruses, and the guitar is different on the second verse and at the very end. And that's the same mix that has been used on all compact disc issues of Tumbleweed and all modern vinyl reissues of Tumbleweed. So why is that important? Well, because in the UK, DJM changed the mix around 1973, and around the same time, MCA in the States changed their mix. Many of the Black Rainbow MCA copies of Tumbleweed and later on have what is now the sort of the more common mix, i.e. not the original mix. What I find curious is that every Canadian copy that I've ever owned, from the Yellow Swirl unis all the way up to the last of the MCA Blue Rainbow copies of Tumbleweed, have always had the original mix. And you may say, well, Matt, obviously MCA Canada had their own cutting tapes and they never updated their cutting tapes. Not true. MCA Canada always pressed, it wasn't just their Elton John stuff, it was a lot of MCA artists. They didn't cut their own lacquers and they didn't do their own plating. Gloversville, New York, the MCA plant in Gloversville would send metal masters up to MCA Records Canada. So Canadian Elton John records on MCA were almost always pressed from American metal masters. And as time went on, as catalog numbers changed, as matrix numbers changed, those metal parts were updated. But the ones that reached Canada always had the original mix of St. Peter on them. I have yet to hear a Canadian vinyl copy that doesn't have the original mix on it. And of course, that invites a million questions. Why did they change the mix in the first place? What was wrong with the original mix? Did they do it on purpose, or was it an accident? Were there any copies in the United States after 1973 that featured the original mix? So many questions about that. But one of the questions that I get asked a lot as a very serious collector is, if I want the original mix of Where to Now St. Peter on CD, where can I get it? And I've compared notes with a lot of other collectors, and I'm sorry to tell you, it ain't available. It has never been made available, and it looks as though it's probably lost to time, because it wasn't used on the remaster, wasn't a bonus track on the 2 CD deluxe that came out in 2008. It's really kind of a mystery there. Lots more to discuss at a later time about that. So at Speed City Records, I said I got one non-Elton thing. I'll show you very quickly, just because of the 3 or 4 records I bought at Speed City that day, this was the most expensive, but it was only $20. And it's Lana Del Rey's Blue Bannisters. Okay. I got it for such a good price because it was an Amazon reject, and it still got it had a lot more stickers on the back. I peeled them off. It's got some seam split. I'm a big Lana Del Rey fan, and I have almost all her albums on one format or another. I think the only one I don't have is Chemtrails, but I'm a big fan of her NFR album. I think it's probably one of the best albums made in the past 20 years by anyone. So I finally have a copy of this, and I've played it and I love it. So in closing, supposed to be a short video. Oh, yeah, okay. So I'm going to try and do something very quick next week. But as I said, over the next week and a half or so, I won't be able to devote a lot of time to creating content. Well, I won't be able to devote a lot of time to editing, but I will be hopefully capturing some interesting stuff on video that I will be able to incorporate into future episodes. So expect a bit of a delay, but it won't last forever. Thank you for your understanding. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more on this channel in coming weeks.